For billions of people, the pursuit of money isn't about luxury, it's about survival. The average worker spends 90,000 hours of their life at their job, sacrificing their passions, health and relationships to make ends meet. It's a system designed to keep us running, where rest feels like rebellion and leisure is a privilege. We're told that hard work is the key to success, that if we just hustle long enough, wealth and freedom will follow. But the truth is, the system isn't built to reward everyone equally. For the vast majority, hard work leads to burnout, not riches. Economic mobility is a myth for most people. The harder they work, the more the system benefits, just not for them. Money convinces us that time is something we can buy back later. A vacation, a retirement, a moment of peace, all postponed for some imagined future. But the truth is, every hour spent chasing money is an hour lost forever. And for many, that realization comes too late. Not everyone is trapped by the clock. Around the world, people are redefining what it means to live a full life, rejecting the idea that their worth is tied to their wealth. Time is the only true currency we have. How we spend it defines who we are, what we value, and what we leave behind. The question isn't how much money we can make, it's how much life we can truly live. The time to choose is now. Think about the device in your pocket, the smartphone you check 100 times a day. It's a marvel of modern technology, but its creation has a hidden, darker cost. Cobalt, a key ingredient in batteries, powers our phones, laptops, and electric vehicles. Around 70% of the world's cobalt comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where thousands of children as young as 6 years old work in perilous mines for as little as $2 a day. The exploitation doesn't stop at the factories or the mines. Human trafficking, a $150 billion industry, is one of the darkest stains on global wealth. From forced labour to sex trafficking, over 25 million people are trapped in modern-day slavery. Lena, a 15-year-old girl from Southeast Asia, was promised a job in the city, but was sold into a trafficking ring. For 2 years, she was forced to work in a brothel catering to wealthy clients who turned a blind eye to her suffering. But how is this allowed to happen? The answer lies in the intricate web of global supply chains. Multinational corporations outsource their labour to countries with weak regulations, turning a blind eye to the exploitation of vulnerable workers. Take chocolate, for example. The cocoa industry, worth $130 billion, is rife with child labour. Over 1.5 million children in West Africa work in hazardous conditions on cocoa farms, many trafficked from neighbouring regions. So while we enjoy a bar of chocolate, someone else, a child perhaps, paid for it with their innocence. In 2021, a report revealed that only 3% of global brands could confidently claim their supply chains were free of child labour. It's easy to feel powerless against these massive systems, but here's the truth. Every dollar we spend is a vote for the kind of world we want to live in. From supporting ethical brands to demanding accountability from corporations, we can push for change. Change starts when we stop turning a blind eye. When we demand transparency, corporations have no choice but to listen. The world's biggest sporting events captivate billions, from the FIFA World Cup to the Olympics. But what's the real cost of hosting such grand spectacles? Let's take Rio 2016 as an example, a $13 billion extravaganza that promised progress and prosperity. Today, its stadiums stand deserted, a ghost town of broken promises. Meanwhile, 77,000 people were forcibly evicted from their homes to make way for the Games. The same story plays out in every host city. For the 22 FIFA World Cup, Qatar spent over $220 billion, nearly 10 times the cost of any previous tournament. And what paid the price? Human lives. According to human rights groups, over 6,500 migrant workers died in Qatar during preparations for the World Cup. The lavish stadiums we marvel at aren't built by the wealthy. they're built by the desperate. In Qatar, thousands of migrant workers from South Asia were lured with promises of decent wages, only to find themselves trapped in a system of exploitation. Sports thrive on sponsorships, but not all money is clean. Companies have turned athletes into walking billboards, selling everything from sugary drinks to gambling platforms. Take gambling, for example. In the UK alone, the sports betting industry is worth over $16 billion, with football teams often promoting betting companies. But what they don't show you is the addiction epidemic it fuels. It starts with small bets. Before you know it, you're in debt, losing your family, your home. And the clubs I loved, they were part of the trap. Studies revealed that over 1.4 million people in the UK are harmed by gambling, many of them drawn in by sports advertisements. And what about us, the fans? We pour our hearts and our wallets into supporting our teams. But are we part of the problem? Ticket prices for major sporting events have skyrocketed. The average ticket to the Super Bowl costs over $5,000, putting the dream of attending beyond the reach of ordinary fans. While we cheer, corporations profit. And while we idolize athletes, their sacrifices often go unnoticed. The true cost of winning is paid by the vulnerable, the exploited and the forgotten. But it doesn't have to be this way. The earth is our home, a source of life, beauty and balance. But in the relentless pursuit of profit, humanity has turned its back on this delicate harmony. This is the story of how greed, masked as progress, is driving environmental destruction at an unprecedented scale. The hunger for resources has led us to strip the earth bare. Industries like mining, logging and oil extraction fuel our economies, but they leave scars that can never heal. Take the Amazon rainforest, the lungs of our planet. Over 17% of its total area has been destroyed in the past 50 years, largely due to cattle ranching, logging and soy farming. At this rate, scientists warn we are nearing a tipping point where the rainforest will no longer generate enough moisture to sustain itself, transforming into a dry savanna. They cut down the trees, poison the rivers, and force us from our lands. All for profit, with no regard for the future. Plastic, a material invented for convenience, has become a global curse. Every minute, the equivalent of a garbage truck full of plastic is dumped into the oceans. The result? By 2050, there could be more plastic than fish in our seas by weight. Marine ecosystems are collapsing as animals ingest or become entangled in our waste. Big corporations profit from single-use plastics, passing the environmental cost to the planet and future generations. Recycling, often touted as the solution, barely makes a dent. Only 9% of all plastic ever produced has been recycled. Plastic production is projected to triple by 2060, with 96% of it derived from fossil fuels. In sub-Saharan Africa, farmers face crop failures due to prolonged droughts. These communities, already struggling, now face existential threats caused by the greed of industrialized nations. The UN estimates that by 2050, over 200 million people could be displaced due to climate-related disasters. The Earth's voice has been drowned out by greed for too long. But the tide is turning. The question is, will we act fast enough to make a difference? Debt. It's the silent epidemic of our modern world. We think of it as a tool, a necessity, a stepping stone to success. But for billions, debt is not freedom. It's a trap, one that enslaves them in a cycle of poverty, stress and despair. In the last century, debt has become a cornerstone of modern economies. In the United States alone, consumer debt has reached an all-time high of $17.5 trillion as of 2024. Credit cards, mortgages, car loans, they were sold to us as tools of empowerment. But the reality, the system was designed to keep us borrowing, not thriving. The average American carries over $5,700 in credit card debt, with interest rates that can exceed 25%, turning small purchases into long-term financial burdens. Higher education, was supposed to be the great equalizer, a way to unlock opportunities and break the cycle of poverty. But today, it's become one of the largest sources of financial enslavement. In the US, student loan debt now totals over $1.8 trillion. Graduates enter the workforce not with a clean slate, but with a financial burden that can last decades. A 2022 study found that 60% of student loan borrowers are unable to pay down their principal due to compounding interest. When the desperate need cash, they often turn to payday loans, small advances with massive consequences. These loans, marketed as lifelines, come with interest rates as high as 400% APR, trapping borrowers in cycles of dependency. The debt trap doesn't just affect individuals. Entire nations are ensnared by loans they can't repay. Developing countries borrow from international lenders like the World Bank and IMF. But high interest rates and stringent repayment terms often push them deeper into poverty. Take Zambia, which spends over 30% of its national budget on debt repayments, more than it spends on healthcare and education combined. These countries are forced to cut essential services, sell off natural resources, and privatise public assets just to stay afloat. It's economic colonisation in a new form. Studies show that people in debt are 3 times more likely to experience depression and anxiety. Suicides linked to financial stress are rising, particularly among young adults. Debt creates a sense of hopelessness. It's not just about money, it's about the loss of control and the fear of never breaking free. So if debt is crushing individuals, communities, and nations, who's winning? The answer is clear. Banks, credit card companies, and lenders profit immensely from a system designed to keep borrowers trapped. In 2023 alone, the top 5 US banks made over $160 billion in net profits, much of it from interest payments and fees. Debt doesn't have to define us. It's time to demand transparency, hold lenders accountable, and build a system that lifts people up instead of tearing them down. Corruption is a parasite that feeds on public trust and robs nations of their future. It is estimated that corruption costs the global economy over $3.6 trillion every year, diverting resources meant for schools, hospitals, and infrastructure into the hands of the greedy. Take the Odebrecht scandal, one of the largest corruption cases in history. The Brazilian construction giant spent over $788 million in bribes across Latin America to secure lucrative government contracts. The cost: entire economies were destabilized and public trust eroded. The shadow economy thrives on crime. From drug cartels to human trafficking rings, these illegal enterprises generate an estimated $2.2 trillion annually, making them among the largest industries in the world. Money laundering is their lifeline. Dirty cash is funneled through legitimate businesses, real estate, and offshore accounts, erasing its origins and allowing crime bosses to live like royalty. They create complex webs of shell companies, hiding their wealth in places like the Cayman Islands. Tracing the money is like chasing shadows. A 2021 study found that over $1 trillion in illicit funds are laundered globally every year, enough to fund universal primary education 17 times over. For the ultra-wealthy, the system works differently. They don't just evade taxes, they rewrite the rules to ensure they never pay their fair share. In tax havens like Bermuda, Switzerland, and the British Virgin Islands, trillions of dollars are stashed away in secret accounts. The result? Governments lose an estimated $500 billion annually in tax revenue, leaving ordinary citizens to foot the bill. The global arms trade is worth over $100 billion annually, feeding conflict and instability across the globe. The shadow economy isn't just a crime against law, it's a crime against humanity. For every dollar hoarded in offshore accounts or laundered by criminals, someone somewhere is paying the price. The money machine may be vast, but it's not invincible. Around the world, individuals and organisations are fighting back. From the investigative journalists who exposed the Panama Papers to anti-corruption units dismantling trafficking rings, the fight against the shadow economy is gaining momentum. The money machine is built on secrecy, greed, and exploitation. But we have the power to demand justice and fairness. The question is, will we use it? The shadow economy thrives in the dark. It's time to shine a light. From the blood-soaked profits of illegal trade to the vast networks of money laundering that sustain the corrupt elite, we've uncovered the dirty secrets that fuel our world. But this is not the end. It's only the beginning. The battle against the darkness of money is ongoing, and each of us has a role to play. The fight for justice, transparency, and accountability has never been more urgent. As we move forward, remember, wealth built on suffering cannot stand forever.